Hello, thank you. It's so nice to see a very full room. Of course, we've been working under the assumption all day that we might be having a lovely conversation with ourselves because of the weather. So thank you so much for coming out. I'm Lynette Clementson, and I'm the director of the Wallace House Center for Journalists here at the university, director of the Knight-Wallace Fellowships, which is at the center of our event today, the Livingston Awards for Young Journalists, and our Wallace House Presents event series. And I know many of you are familiar with it because I see a lot of familiar faces here in the room who come to many of our events. So thank you so much. It's nice to see people that we see regularly, but it's especially nice right now because it means that you understand the importance of journalism and having conversations about the protection of journalism. And while we wish it was a completely full room, that we know that those of you are here will be listening carefully and hopefully be sharing information with people who might have tuned out right now because there's so much going on that the temptation to tune out is great, but we're going to be talking about things that we shouldn't be tuning out from. And though we're talking about international journalism today, because that is the core of this event every year, it shouldn't go lost on anyone that everything we are talking about relates to our own situation here in the United States. So I'm just especially thankful to see you here today. This event is one that we launched in 2017 in honor of the man who came in the beautiful hat, Charles Eisendrath. Charles, if you can stand. I know many of you know Charles. He ran Wallace House, Knight-Wallace Fellowships for 30 years. He has been my mentor and continues to be my supporter in my time as director of Wallace House. And so it's always a pleasure to have this event in his honor. One of the things that Charles did in establishing the Knight-Wallace Fellowships as what many people consider to be a gem of the university is really making international journalism and issues in international press freedom and journalism really central to everything we do. And as somebody who took over the organization, it's really good to inherit an organization that's very clear about its mission. And so thank you, Charles. You may come. Come here. If you're going to say something, you should come. No. I will interpret. They can't hear you. You have to come here. You were going to make me do an interpretive dance?
I am.
Yes.
Get ready.
Okay.
I wanted to say that the most important thing I did was to make sure in every way possible that I had a really great successor.
Thank you. So now that all the mushy stuff is done, this event is one that we'll be recording for our archives, but I want to ask that you please do not record this event in audio or video. The things that we'll be talking about are things that we want to always protect our fellows. And so when we're talking about sensitive topics in other countries, we're really careful about how we treat the information because information and the way it's used and misused and altered is part of the danger that we're going to be talking about today. So we'd like you to respect our space in the room and really join in the conversation, but please not record it. So there'll be a Q&A following today's conversation. We've got mics on either side. If you cannot get to the mic, these are really long rows. If you can't get to the mic, raise your hand and we'll make sure that someone gets a mic to you. We're saving time at the end for lots of questions. Also, because you all have come out on a day that you certainly didn't need to, we have a reception across the hall that's open to everyone. We hope you'll stay, speak with our speakers and one another, and enjoy some good food and drink after we are finished. So, what brings us here today? Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 came with a swift and decisive crackdown on press freedom. Independent Russian media organizations were forced to close, scattering to operate from nearby countries. Ukrainian journalists were specifically targeted in warfare and extrajudicial executions. But Putin's determination to silence the media reaches beyond Russia and Ukraine. Throughout Central and Eastern Europe and Central Asia, there are disturbing ripple effects with far-reaching implications, whether through direct suppression, like banning the use of the word war in news reports and jailing, threatening or physically attacking reporters, or more indirect actions like labeling journalists as foreign agents and fostering public distrust through disinformation and misinformation, the goal is the same: to suppress independent factual reporting and to weaken societies with a goal of amassing control. The tactics and warning signs look different across regions, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Central Asia, the Caucasus, Eastern and Central Europe. Today, we'll hear a comparative view with journalists from Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, and Estonia, all of them current Knight-Wallace Fellows. If you haven't had a chance to meet any of this year's Knight-Wallace Fellows here at the university, know that our doors are always open at Wallace House, and our fellows, one of the things that's so wonderful about them is the way they engage across campus, speaking to classes, meeting with students and faculty. So again, I invite you to stay at the reception. If you haven't met them, they're extraordinary, brave journalists, and we're so proud to have them in our program. I also want to say, again, making the connection from the international news that we'll be talking about today to things that we hope you'll be paying attention to here. This week, if you were paying attention, you may know that in the United States, an Associated Press reporter was barred from a White House event because the AP, which creates the style guide that most journalism organizations comply with, decided that it would not change in its style guide the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. For punishment for that, their reporters have been barred from White House events that this organization that is nearly 200 years old has always had access to. This should be of concern to all of us, and I mention it here because this penalizing reporters for the use of words is where many of the things that we'll talk about today starts. So with that, I will turn things over to our moderator, Chynybaeva Zubrisky, the Weiser Family Professor in European and Eurasian Studies, and the William H. Sewell Jr. Collegiate Professor of Sociology here at the university. She's director of the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia and the Copernicus Center for Polish Studies. Her research focuses on nationalism and religion, collective memory, and cultural politics in Eastern Europe and North America. She's a member of the board of directors of the Reckoning Project, an NGO investigating war crimes committed against civilian populations in Ukraine. And our fellows here today, starting next to Chynybaeva, Joseph Sywenkyj is an award-winning American photographer of Ukrainian descent who has lived and worked in Ukraine for over 20 years. He's a current joint fellow of the Knight-Wallace Fellowship and the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia. We are so thankful to WCEE for being such a good partner of ours over the past several years, and me personally to Chynybaeva for being a wonderful thought partner with very similar values and mission, and so thank you for your support. In the middle here, Baktygul Chynybaeva is a journalist from Kyrgyzstan with more than 20 years of experience covering healthcare, environmental, and human rights issues. She is fluent in 5 languages. She serves as a correspondent for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty's Central newsroom in Prague. We'll hear more about Radio Free Europe if that's an organization that you've never thought about or never heard of. It's something you should have your eye on. And Holger Roonemaa is from Estonia, where he manages the investigative and fact-checking team at the daily news site Delfi. He's also an editor with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and he's covered money laundering, corruption, national security, espionage, propaganda, and other light subjects. So I also want to take a moment just to shout out Holger, because today in Estonia, it was announced that Holger and his teammates won the Bonnier Investigative Journalism Award in Estonia for a set of stories where they revealed the corrupt and unethical affairs of the country's Minister of Justice. Their stories led to the resignation of the minister and a criminal investigation. So just a brief round of applause for Holger. With that, I will take my seat, and I think turn it over to the event. Thank you. I can speak, but pressing buttons is sometimes difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette, and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the three of you. And I thought that to start us off, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about, from each of you, if you could tell us how the flow of information and how journalists are doing their work in your respective countries, and what changes there might be now that could be cause for concern. So, Joseph, we could start with you, and there's plenty going on in Ukraine.
Yes. Before I can really start talking about the state of being a journalist in Ukraine, I first have to kind of get you all on the same page about what's happening in Ukraine in general. So very briefly, Russia has occupied about 20% of Ukrainian territory in the east and south of the country. The front line is about 1,200 kilometers in length, 700 or so miles. That is very active. The combat there is fierce. Every weapon system you can imagine, old and new, is being used there at this moment. Russia loses probably about 1,200 to 1,500 soldiers a day, casualties, killed and wounded. Ukraine also suffers heavy casualties, but not nearly as high. Beyond the front line, Russia attacks Ukraine with Iranian-designed attack drones every single night, minimum probably several dozen. Also uses various missile systems, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, so-called hypersonic missiles on a very regular basis throughout the country. In fact, Kyiv was attacked by drones and I think 6 ballistic missiles just 2 nights ago. Ukrainian journalists live with this every single day, and they have for 3 full years. Many have lived with it for going on 11 years now. In particular, those who've been covering the war and the front lines of it. I think around 15 Ukrainian journalists have been killed while doing their work in the last 3 years. Some of them my friends. Somewhere around 80 Ukrainian journalists have been killed while serving in the Ukrainian armed forces, actually probably closer to 90. These are people who put down their cameras and notebooks and joined the military voluntarily or were drafted, and they were killed in the war in the last 3 years in particular. That's just the daily reality, very brief daily reality of what life is like in Ukraine currently. So journalists basically have to navigate this. The front line is very dangerous. Working even at home, you can be at home and a missile or drone can kill you there, which has happened to journalists as well. Beyond the war, some investigative journalists have been harassed by the Ukrainian authorities. I think once or twice draft notices were handed out to some journalists who did some work that the authorities didn't really care for. Ukrainian civil society is actually very active and raised an uproar, and I think some of those things that were these shady kind of things that the authorities were trying to punish journalists with were being kind of taken back. So that's kind of the daily life of journalists in Ukraine at this moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Baktygul, how is it in Kyrgyzstan?
Well, in Kyrgyzstan currently, right now, journalists are fully under control of the government. And using a language, as Lynette mentioned, is a huge issue in our country, because starting from 2022, when Russia's war in Ukraine has started, Central Asian countries, all of them, and Kyrgyz journalists we were banned to use the word war, describing Russia's war in Ukraine as a war. We are still using special operation as Putin used to describe the war, and if we write, and if my colleagues in Kyrgyzstan write war as a war, they will be punished by, and they have been punished by putting them into prison, prosecuting them, jailing, attacking, or bullying online, offline, threatening their lives, their beloved lives. Last year in January, 11 journalists were arrested in a single morning. Imagine, in a single morning, 11 Kyrgyz journalists who were doing investigations related to Russia's war in Ukraine and also corruption in Kyrgyzstan were arrested. And 3 media outlets were seized down and their offices were closed. And currently, in grassroots level, media organizations, they are just now silenced and they can't write about like corruption deals and other stuff. They can't do investigations because of the fear. And from the start of the 2021 until the end of the 2024, 61 person was detained, put into prison, jailed, and prosecuted. Among them, majority of them, of course, journalists and bloggers who were doing investigations on government's corruption cases and also Russia's war in Ukraine. But besides journalists and bloggers, government is arresting writers, singers, housewives, pensioners, even labor migrants in Russia. They are abducting them from Russia. Russian government is helping abduct labor migrants who are writing criticism about Putin's policies, about our government's policies. They are abducting them at night, bringing them to Kyrgyzstan, and some of them were jailed in Kyrgyzstan. So people are here to say something about Russia's war in Ukraine and also about the government's corruption deals. It's like this.
Serious. Holger.
I feel a little bit like an outlier here. I don't have much to complain about, actually. I'm sorry. Regarding that question, at least, perhaps later. I think Estonia was in the latest press freedom rankings globally number 6. I could talk quite a bit about why I think we are too high on that ranking, that perhaps we should be number 12 or number 13, but I don't think that it would be a very interesting discussion for this crowd. But still, I would like to bring out perhaps 2 issues that I see as particularly, I don't know, dangerous or what I see concern in Estonia. One of them is SLAPP cases, which means legal cases against journalists and media outlets. The rule of thumb is that the heavier we report on a story, the heavier editing we do, the heavier fact-checking we do, the more certain it is that we will get sued because of the story. We've had a number of cases, and the recent strategy of people suing us, you know, all the, I don't know, businesses we write about, organized crime, and so on. Their strategy is that we are not anymore suing so much the media company who we are working for, but we are coming after reporters personally. And then this is damaging. So far, we haven't had like really bad examples because media companies have stepped in and then have covered all the legal costs. But like, imagine for any reporter to be sued for a damage of a few €100,000 or dollars, it's not a comfortable feeling. And you know that any time, in theory, your employer can step away from behind your back. Just one example, my 2 teammates were sued in Dubai by an Estonian businessman. Yeah. So this is not streamed. I can be a little bit more free in my language as well, I think. And then that legal case ended up costing us somewhere around $100,000 just to protect our 2 reporters. But the second thing I want to talk about is journalists' security and safety. First of all, I think that the general security level of Estonian newsrooms is extremely poor. But it's not only theoretical. It was roughly 1 year ago that car of one of the most prominent Russian language journalists in Estonia was vandalized, the windows were smashed, and it later emerged that it was this sabotage or whatever, vandalism was ordered by Russian intelligence services. We are, like all of Estonian media is reporting on Russia-related issues a lot, and we can see that Russia still feels somewhat comfortable operating on our territories. They are using Telegram to just hire like thugs for a few €100 perhaps only. And that we can sense that threat to reporters who are more deeply covering Russia-related issues.
Thank you for providing this broad overview of the situation. And what's interesting also with Lynette's comments and introduction and what some of the things you mentioned is commonalities also with things that are happening right now in the US. You mentioned lawsuits, so I think it's ABC was sued by President Trump, and they settled in order to contain the situation. The language and the direct threats. I mean, that's not something that's happening, but the harassment that's happening of journalists is happening in other places. In Poland, just yesterday, for example, and that's leading to my second question about what's happening here in the U.S. Federal cuts from the federal system is affecting a lot of organizations throughout the U.S., but also far beyond the U.S. So many Americans may not know, but that many investigative journalism organizations in Europe receive funding from American government-funded NGOs like the National Endowment for Democracy, or even directly from the federal government through organizations like Radio Free Europe. And then yesterday I was reading that a major independent news outlet in Poland has seen its funding from the National Endowment for Democracy frozen and has become a target of an harassment campaign on X, both from the Polish and the American right, which suggests that actually it's a concerted effort to undermine the legitimacy of that outlet. So how has the recent cuts and freezes by the Trump administration affected funding for journalism in your countries? And if so, to what extent? And perhaps we should start with you on this question, Baktygul, since you came here to Ann Arbor directly from Radio Free Europe.
Yes, and I want to point out for your question two things regarding to the funding. First of all, I want...
Can you hear? No. Baktygul, I think you need to move your mic.
Okay.
Could you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Better, but I
Better, yeah? Oh, okay.
speak directly into it. Maybe
Yeah. I want to point out two major things related to the funding. First of all, I want to explain what is the Radio Free Europe and Liberty. What is it? U.S. government funded Radio Free Europe and Liberty, Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, and Middle East Radio, and also Cuba Broadcasting Radio, right after the World War II. And it was a soft tool for against communism. And currently, Radio Free Europe and Liberty is covering in United States Agency for Global Media is covering in 64 countries in overseas. And Radio Free Europe and Liberty is covering 27 countries in former Soviet Union states and also in Middle East. So those $900 million, which was mentioned by Elon Musk in his tweet, and he stated Richard Grenell's post too, Trump's special envoy, Richard Grenell's post, that stating that Radio Free Europe needs to be shut down because Europe is free now and why we need it. So Radio Free Europe is not covering only Europe, it's covering Central Asia, Middle East, all of the former Soviet Union countries, where around 400 million people are residing and listening every day. And they subscribe to websites, to Facebook pages, to YouTube channels. So audience is so high. And this radio is a main tool to propaganda, to agitate democracy, open society, human rights. So I want all of you know what it is, and that's why I'm just explaining the importance of the funding. And from last year, from November, in Radio Free Europe Liberty's office, we are, I'm not working right now there, but I have heard that massive layoffs are happening there too. And the radio don't know about the exact funding for the next year. It's hanging on the air. We don't know who's gonna lead Radio Free Europe in a Trump's administration, or whether they're gonna keep the Radio Free Europe, or whether they're gonna just shut down it. But if the radio is gonna be shut down, it's gonna be like huge loss for every American people. You should be so proud of this radio, because this radio is promoting your values to the worldwide, to the former Soviet Union countries. And it's doing in their own national languages. For example, I have been working in Radio Free Europe's Kyrgyz service for 9 years, and I have done thousands of reportings in my own language, promoting my own culture. So you should be very proud of that. America is saving democracy in our national languages. And giving up this radio is gonna be a huge loss for every American citizen, I think. And regarding other point, the funding through National Endowment Center or USAID, United States Agency for International Development, every year Kyrgyzstan used to receive $10 million for media-related projects from USAID. So our grassroots level organizations, media organizations, investigative media, small newsrooms, they used to have funding from the US government. And they were promoting transparency, democracy, and human rights in our countries. And currently, they're cut off from this funding. And before this, they were intimidated. They have been intimidated and they have been shut down by our government. And now our government is just applauding for Trump's tweet, for Grenell's tweet too. And 3 days ago, our president, Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov made an official statement saying that I am supporting Trump's tweet, and we are ready to shut down Radio Free Europe's Kyrgyz service in our country. It's going to be a huge loss for freedom of speech in Central Asia, because the only hope for the free and non-biased reporting was for Radio Free Europe. Radio Free Europe's Kyrgyz, Uzbek, Tajik services. They had their own reporters there, and I don't know what will happen if their funding will cut off. It's going to be a disaster for freedom of speech overall in our countries.
So Holger, do you see in Estonia challenges like this? And this is happening as we're basically sitting here and talking, right? So it's difficult. I know that it's difficult perhaps to give us like a clear picture, because everything changes a little bit every day. But one question that I would want to ask you specifically too is if you think that Western European partners would be willing to step in if funding to Estonia or also to Kyrgyzstan and other places would dry up.
Again, Estonia here is a total exception because we have quite strong, financially strong private media, which does employ investigative teams as well. We don't have non-profit form investigative journalism, but then, thank God that we never had reason or requirement, the need to actually form them. So Estonia is not affected by that, but I also work for the Organized Crime and Corruption Project, the OCCRP, which is one of the two major international investigative journalism networks. OCCRP is like well known for covering different money laundering schemes, all the laundromats, like, I think, yeah, like whatever you can imagine from last year's investigative journalism globally, probably OCCRP had something to do with it. And the way how OCCRP works is that they have member centers internationally, from Europe, from Central Asia, from the Caucasus countries, and so on. And OCCRP lost last week, 2 weeks ago, 40% of its budget overnight. Which means that by today, more than 40 people have been laid off from OCCRP alone, from the actual like core of OCCRP. Some of them are reporters and journalists, some of them are fact checkers, some of them are people who actually help us get reach to our stories, who work with social media or traffic management. Some of them are people who help us do research. And that is one part of it. But that doesn't even take into account the member centers that we have, like, I don't know, working in Georgia, working in Ukraine, working in Central Asian countries, and also working in European Union countries. Some of them lost almost 100% of their funding. Today I was talking to a colleague from a European country and I asked, but how are you doing? And then she told me that, to be honest, we are totally, I'm not going to say the last word. We have money running. We have money remaining until June, and we don't have any dollar beyond that. We have 3 months to secure something. But the OCCRP will survive because it's so large. But yes, it's losing 40%, but it will still have, like, I don't know, $9 million in its budget. But the small member centers who in many countries are operating like in really small teams, like 5 or 6 people, they need to write projects, they need to write project reports, they need to report, they need to edit, they need to promote their stories, and so on. They don't have that capability to also fundraise. And they are coming many from those countries that are the most hit, that are in the most dire situation, like democracy-wise, for example. And I would also like to make one more point, that it's not only the money that's being pulled away. By pulling away the money, and then by how they are doing it, like Musk and Trump, this hands another weapon to all of the people and organizations that we have been reporting about. We are all using that now, like what Musk is tweeting or sharing about RFE, Radio Free Europe, or WCEE or any other. They're using it to attack us, to smear us. And then they are using this opportunity to build this hate against media. And I think that is at least as serious reason for concern as well. It's not only about money.
I want to add, to Holger's point, that in Kyrgyzstan we used to have advocacy groups for free speech, and also they were helping to journalists who are in jail, who are in prison, and those advocacy groups used to have grants from USAID, and now they don't have any funding. And I don't know how our jailed and prosecuted journalists and bloggers will have support in the future.
Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico tweeted 2 days ago or something like that, he tweeted about writing a letter to Elon Musk and asking Musk to give him a list of all non-profit organizations who have received funding from USAID. But you can only think what he wants to do with that list. Well, even though much of it is public anyway.
Democratic backsliding in the region and in this country is far-reaching. So this is very concerning. But to go back to the situation in Ukraine, what we've noticed during the war is really a united front from journalists who agree to, for example, describe the war using very similar language, not to cede to pressures, for example, not to name it, a war, to also broadcast the same story so that the public, both at home and abroad, would be informed about the extent of the ravages of the war. So how long, this is very good on the one hand. On the other, it also could kind of flatten discourse about the war and whether there might be now a position or stronger supports for, you know, a ceasefire or peace at whatever cost versus, you know, continuing resistance. I just want to ask you to reflect a bit on how long this strategy, this kind of unified front, might be effective and what might be the unintended negative consequences of that. You know, this suspension of debate at wartime and when...
I think you're referring in particular to this kind of concept right at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. A lot of Ukraine's national TV channels unified, and they're all, you know, basically if you change Ukrainian TV channels, news channels, you would actually see the same exact report on like 5 of them, if not more. Same reporters, same stories, same analysts, everything like that. That started happening really soon after the full-scale invasion for multiple reasons. One, there was an incredible amount of disinformation out there. And also, excuse me, they needed to get a lot of information out there for people to know how to evacuate and how to save lives. So because of the disinformation, they basically needed to get people all on the same page. So people needed to know where they could evacuate from, where they could go to, what routes were safe. It was absolute chaos. You had millions of people trying to flee their homes. So that, I think, served a purpose in the beginning of the war. Rather quickly, I'd say within months, people started questioning its usefulness anymore, and I think they still are. Ukraine has a fairly robust, I'd say, independent media, some of it commercial, some of it foreign funded, either by USAID, which is paused obviously now, or through the European Union. So you can get alternative sources beyond these TV channels, both radio, online, some of them funded within Ukraine entirely. So yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned something that's really critical, and it's disinformation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be very helpful to hear like how disinformation is working. What are the processes at work and the different influences that are pushing disinformation and misinformation in Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, and Estonia, where you have also a large Russian minority in Estonia? Let's start with Holger, maybe?
Yeah, just for reference that roughly a quarter of Estonian population is speaking Russian language at home. They are native Russian language speakers. So I would say about this information that right now I can see 3 different large sources of this information. One of them is populist far-right politicians and then their followers, of course. The second one, which is increasingly strong, is related to conspiracy theories, anti-vax, but increasingly more this not in my backyard gang. We have really large ambitions in Estonia to build wind power plants, for example, and then we can see how that NIMBY effect is taking effect there, and then how largely it's spreading in local communities all sorts of disinformation about separate type of health issues that it can bring. And then thirdly, of course, it's Russia-related or Russia-originating. And then Russia is targeting Russian language audience in Estonia. They want to keep Russian language audience under their information sphere or system or dominance. Estonia has blocked 70-something Russian TV channels in Estonia, like Russian national TV channels.
Repeat the number, please.
I think it was 72, 70 plus.
72
yeah, exactly.
TV channels broadcasting in Estonia.
Yeah, they are some of them are Russian private TV channels, some of them are state TV channels, but they are all, because they are not operating as independent media. We all know how we have done investigations, how they receive tasks, what are the narratives they need to push. We all know that Russia is using journalism as a way, as a weapon, how to achieve its foreign political goals, and then that's it. And that besides 70 plus TV stations, we have also blocked or sanctioned more than 300 Russian news sites and web pages. Yeah, Russia is now using a lot of Telegram. We can see that Telegram is one of the most popular news sources, especially for the Russian language audience in Estonia. But when I was talking about these three different kind of like categories where disinformation is coming from, what is important here is that from time to time, all three kind of like, maybe not knowingly, but they start like promoting each other and cross-promoting each other's messages. So for example, when we see, I don't know, local protests or discussions about building a wind farm or expanding a military training ground, we always see how Russian disinformation channels jump onto the topic and really like strongly start amplifying those messages. We have received internal documents showing how before parliamentary elections Russia sends, or different Russian organizations send their people to Estonia for field study trips and to understand what are the narratives that they can actually promote and push, what are such narratives that are most polarizing in the society. So that's how it works.
Thank you.
So I'm so envious, Holger.
I'm sorry.
You're so lucky to be an Estonian. So I'm not that lucky. So Central Asian countries mostly speak Russian language, and in our, not only in Kyrgyzstan, but overall in all of the Central Asian countries, we have Russian state medias aired 24 hours. I think more than 10 Russian TV channels are now state-controlled Russian TV channels are airing right now in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan probably, because Turkmenistan is so closed country and we don't know what's happening there inside. It's like second closed country after the North Korea. So in Kyrgyzstan particularly, we have hundreds of Russian websites operating and also a huge agency, news agency Sputnik. And people are so brainwashed in our country. They don't have pretty much alternative sources to compare misinformation and disinformation. And when the topic comes to the war, Russia's war in Ukraine, people are so divided with each other in terms of opinions. And if someone will say or post about that Russia invaded Ukraine and they are doing wrong things, a lot of people is gonna write opposite opinions in a Facebook or on a Twitter or everywhere. So it's dangerously hard in Kyrgyzstan, and I can compare Kyrgyzstan's media landscape or internet like a nuclear test site in Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan, you know. Russia is doing whatever they want in our countries, and they are promoting their policies, their culture, and their approach to the war in Putin's way, in Kremlin's way. The only alternative was, and still is, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberties, local offices, local bureaus, Kyrgyz Bureau, Fergana Bureau, we call it Fergana Bureau, it's a United Central Asian Bureau, and Uzbek Bureau, they are doing their investigations and reportings in Prague because of the security issues of journalists, they can't be in Uzbekistan, and Kazakh Bureau and Tajik Bureau, so they're operating very nicely, and they are doing reportings from, they are sharing reportings from our Ukraine colleagues, which are, they're so strong in terms of reporting about war. And also we have a lot of labor migrants. Kyrgyzstan's population is only 7 million, and roughly 1.5 million our citizens, they are doing labor migration in Russia, and we are dependent country, economically dependent country. So we have to rely on Russian information sources somehow, and the only alternative is to build our independent media, which seems currently not possible.
Just a really quick comment, because Baktygul mentioned Sputnik News. that in Estonia, when someone is working for Sputnik News or Russia Today, for example, they are criminally charged for the breach of violation. They are indicted and they are convicted. We've had like real cases on that.
No, we don't have, unfortunately. We have a Sputnik office, huge office in Bishkek, in the center of Bishkek. Imagine Sputnik's huge office. And also our government is paying to Russian state medias to be aired in our country. Imagine, it's hilariously, like, I don't know how insane could be one independent country in terms of media and cybersecurity issues, but still, Central Asian countries are very dependent on Russia.
So in Ukraine, the authorities started to ban Russian TV channels probably shortly after the initial invasion of Ukraine in 2014. It wasn't simply because of disinformation. These channels were lying and using outright pretty despicable, ugly hate speech. A little bit later, I think maybe 2017, they started to ban Russian social media sites, like the equivalent of a Russian equivalent of Facebook and things like that, for similar reasons, because Russians would, the authorities would use these to spread information and try to divide people. So while Ukraine was doing this, they're actually being criticized by people in the US and the European Union saying like, oh, this is undemocratic. But later they went and did the same things afterwards, you know, after 2022.
Actually, I'm Canadian, and I have a lot of Canadian friends and Canadian family members, and a lot of them are canceling, you know, Netflix, Facebook, and all of these things because they also don't want to get their news from American outlets. So it's.
Can I quickly make a comment about Facebook and social media platforms, because you brought it up? One thing that I would really like to stress here is the role of social media platforms. And again, I think that Slovakia is the country, at least in European Union right now, which is in the worst condition. Like how fast media freedom is being eroded there, that's awful. And then one of the things, what again Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico's government is doing, is that they are constantly like publishing hate posts about independent journalists in Slovakia. And then where Facebook comes into play, especially Meta comes into play, is that they are not only publishing, but they are buying they're like buying it, paying for it as an ad, so it comes up as a sponsored post. And then Facebook actually allows these posts to get extra reach. Facebook is making money out of it. And when independent journalists are protesting against it, trying to get these posts down, Meta doesn't react. They say that it's okay. At the same time, when investigative journalists, independent journalists are publishing their investigations on Facebook, Facebook doesn't allow it. It says that it's against community rules, and then that's the situation.
This is a global problem with Meta, right? So this is something even that we saw Russian bots trying to influence the 2016 elections, and that was proven, etc. And then, you know, nothing happened from this. And actually, we saw Zuckerberg being brought back into the fold of President Trump very recently. I just want to shift a little bit since you are, you know, seasoned journalists and experts in the area, to expand beyond your respective countries and ask if, you know, your knowledge of the Caucasus more broadly or other places, you know, adjacent to Ukraine, Moldova, or Romania, or other places in the Baltic countries, if you have any observations to share about the broader regions.
I want to share what is experiencing currently Georgia. Georgia is a Caucasus country, and they had an election in November, I think, November, yeah, or end of October. And Georgian community is still protesting against these elections. In elections, Russian-sided party and candidate won, and Georgia's dream is Georgia's real dream. I'm not mentioning Georgia's dream party. Georgia's real dream is to join European Union and to become a member. And they have been working so hard toward it. But currently, with the cyber attacks, probably with the misinformation and with the effect Russian government is doing to the Georgia's dream, this party's name, party, they have won election and now people are protesting against it. Throughout 3 months, people around Georgia protesting against the results of election and against the implementation of the legislation called, it's a famous law, foreign agent law, which was implemented in my country, in Kyrgyzstan, 2 years ago. And my country, Kyrgyzstan, is copying every Kremlin law which related to media. And Georgia also want to implement this law, and it has been voted many times in the parliament, and they have been doing protests around, I think, almost a year against this law and against the election results. It's a one Caucasus region example. From our reportings, I know I am following this example, and Moldova also has some protests against Russian influence. And when it comes to Azerbaijan and Armenia, especially Azerbaijan, it has like very authoritarian government, and they won't do anything to support freedom of speech. And they have jailed a lot of journalists, among them my previous colleagues to Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberties, journalists also in the prison right now in Azerbaijan. So overall, Caucasus regions are like, except from Georgia, they are just silent, seemingly silent. And Georgia's example is so unique because if Georgia falls, other countries are also going to fall.
Maybe also about Belarus.
I was actually just that's what was going through my mind. My focus has been almost entirely on Ukraine for the past 3 years, but before the full-scale invasion, I was also living and working in Ukraine, and a lot of journalists from Belarus in particular, also Russian journalists, they fled to Ukraine because that was a safer place for them to be. There was a Belarusian journalist who was killed in a car bombing, probably 2017 or 18. No one's quite sure who did it. But he had people who were unhappy with him in Belarus and in Russia. Sentsov, I think Oleg Sentsov was his name. And a lot of them have probably fled again. It's probably not so easy to be a Russian citizen in Ukraine right now, for obvious reasons. So I assume that a lot of those people have since fled.
But I could talk about Slovakia the whole evening, but I will not talk about them anymore right now. And I think there is no point, there is always, of course, point, but we all know how bad the situation in Hungary has been already for years. But I would like to mention the independent journalists from Russia and then Belarus as well. Many of whom have moved to European Union countries to work in exile. And then they are doing world-class journalism. I don't know, publications like Important Stories, iStories from Russia, or Project Media, or Medusa, The Insider, so on. We are doing totally. I'm totally admiring how they are working. But the problem here is that, imagine the conditions of how they are working. All of the journalists have basically criminal investigations going against them in Russia or Belarus. Their families who have remained behind are being harassed on a daily or weekly basis. they have lost their revenue model because if they are serving Russian audience, Russian ad clients can't buy ads from them. It's forbidden. The sources are forbidden to talk with them because they would be criminally punished for that. So imagine the conditions how they are working, and then at the same time, these medias are like some of our last chances to actually understand what's going on in Russia, to actually independently understand what's going on and publicly understand. Of course, there is intelligence agencies doing some, but what we see, what independent media is doing, that's irreplaceable. And European countries have not been able to secure their security of Excel journalists. We've had cases when Russian journalists have been poisoned in Germany. Luckily not lethally, but still poisoned. We've had many cases when journalists, also European journalists actually, have needed to move away from Europe to the United States because European countries can't guarantee their physical security. They just needed to escape from Europe, from Germany, from UK, from totally totally okay countries. They are not safe. And of course, no one wants to fund them. They have lost their funding opportunities at home. And the European Commission, for example, says that we don't want to work with them. We can't fund them because Russia is a hopeless country.
So the situation is grim. It's grim there. It's not so sunny here either right now. But there's a lot of talent and people who are actually dedicated, devoted to researching, investigating, writing, and disseminating the knowledge they have about very complex issues. So on that encouraging note, now I think it's time to move to the Q&A portion of this event. So I want to remind people that we have 2 microphones on either side of the room. If you are unable to reach the microphones, please raise your hand and we're going to bring one to you. But I encourage you to continue this conversation with our 3 experts.
While they're moving to the microphones, I have a question for Baktygul. Just to clarify, you did an explanation of how Radio Free Europe how it functions when it was founded. But could you be clear for the audience, because if people aren't familiar, you mentioned that it reports on issues related, it upholds democratic standards. But I think it's important to clarify for the audience that Radio Free Europe reporters are not told what to report.
Exactly. We have freedom in Radio Free Europe and Liberty. No one is no one is telling us to write something, neither from American side, neither from other side. And we have pure editorial freedom. And for example, myself, I encourage it to build up climate change journalism within the Radio Free Europe and Liberty and healthcare journalism, because these 2 issues were strongly related to human rights. And as I was doing, a lot of journalists was doing this, different topics freely, and no one is not saying us to write something. And with this approach, Radio Free Europe and Liberty became as an NPR for former Soviet Union countries. No one is if you go to the people, if you go to the village, they will not say, you are American radio or you are from Western countries. They will say, you are my Azatık. Azatık means liberty. And you are my radio. And a lot of generation was grown up with our radio, learning Kyrgyz. Imagine, in our countries, Russian is a primary language, and they have been learning Kyrgyz, Uzbek, Tajik from our radio, because we have been airing in our national languages in a simple, in a very free way. So that's why I totally so emotional on the role of the Radio Free Europe in our countries. And as a Kyrgyzstani and as a journalist, I don't want this radio being shut up and being cut off from the airing and from the being the voice of the voiceless. Because during Soviet time, I do remember my grandfather, he used to listen to this radio, not fearing from the Soviet government. He used to go up to the mountains and to cut this AM frequency, and he used to listen to this radio from the Washington, from Munich. They have been voicing, broadcasting from Washington and from Munich in our local languages. So this is our NPR for former Soviet Union countries.
Thank you.
I just want to run a quick correction on something I said earlier. I just used my phone to look it up. It was Pavel Sheremet who was killed in a car bombing in 2016.
Thank you. Okay, we have two brave people who are there to pose a question. I will go first to you.
Hi, and thank you so much for taking the time and effort to speak with us. This is incredibly brave, given how dangerous the world has become for journalists in recent years. I had a question for you based on the American situation pertaining to journalism. So, the Washington Post, as you all know, is a major paper in the US and is now under the ownership of Jeff Bezos. And in the last election cycle, breaking tradition, the Washington Post refused to take a stand and endorse a candidate. Now, the motto of the Washington Post, as we all know, is democracy dies in darkness. However, this does seem to be co-opted by its very wealthy owner. You mentioned concerns over funding for independent journalism and Radio Free Europe and those organizations in general. So I was curious if that same concern of, being bought up by wealthy actors who might have other agendas is a risk or a concern that you guys experience.
I can say about Jeff Bezos or Washington Post that it was actually Jeff Bezos himself who came up with that slogan or a motto that democracy never dies in darkness, and they've changed that motto now as well. But about wealthy owners, I think it is an issue. I think it is a problem, but I don't have a very good solution for it. But I think that media ownership I think it's super dangerous when media is owned by wealthy businessmen or corporations who have vast business interests outside of media as well. When Jeff Bezos bought Washington Post, what was it, back in 2013 or 14, the first 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer, 7 or 8 years, he basically, every decision that he did about Washington Post was the correct one. The Post was growing, it was employing a new super strong journalists, they were doing groundbreaking investigations, and then so on, and then he wasn't afraid of Trump in 2016 or anything, and then in 2024, something changed. And what changed is that he has now much more dominant business ideas, probably as well related to all the hopes that he sees in AI, and in space, of course, as well. And then that is dangerous. Talking a little bit larger about big tech, for example, and then the algorithms and then social media, what is the most dangerous thing here, in my opinion, is that these companies depend on, most of these companies depend on only one person's choices. They don't have a larger body who would somehow approve changes to algorithms, for example. It's one guy, usually it's a guy, I think always it's a guy, wakes up, thinks that today we're going to start promoting far-right racist posts. We're going to tweak that in our algorithm, and then that's it. And then the same applies for media as well. But now we're going to downrank what media is publishing, and that's it. And then that's just one person's deliberation, and that's it. And then I think this shouldn't be like this.
The media system in Central Asia and Kyrgyzstan is so different from American media system. We have state-owned medias and independent medias, and independent medias primarily they used to be funded by international donors, and currently, and a lot of private medias also we have, but they are not strong enough like Radio Free Europe or state-owned national TVs. So that's why it's completely different. But on the other hand, I want to point out on the troll factories, which we have in our countries. They are using technologies like Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or Twitter to cyberbully strong journalism, independent journalism. So that is the other case in our country, which is happening right now in all over the Central Asian countries, and especially in Kyrgyzstan. Even we call our current president as a troll factory king. So he came to power through WhatsApp groups, through implementing a lot of Facebook groups into the power to become a president and to make a people to. He is a populist, and he has done a lot of WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups, and this influence through trolls and bots and cyber influence was so high and still high. So that's why we don't have issue like Jeff Bezos issues or something like this, but we have still issues like troll factories and cyberbullying and etc.
I guess I could, but there might be other questions.
Well, if you have something, please. If not,
Go ahead.
no?
Sir. Okay, thank you. This has been a very sobering and I might say dark conversation, especially in the context of what's happening here. So I almost feel like I have a favor to ask. Can you give us something hopeful? And I might reframe that by saying you must have hope because you stay in the business. And what might you say to somebody young who wants to get into the business? Give us some hope.
Thank you. I think this question was for me because I think, was it today that Elon Musk compared journalists, well, sorry, not journalists, but US federal agencies to weed, that it's like weed that's growing and then you just cut it off. I think investigative journalists are also like weed, and I'm pretty happy about it. That you can cut us off or cut us down. Maybe you can close down some organizations. Maybe some projects or stories will not be published today or will take longer time. But we will grow back because there is something in our mentality that no matter how difficult the conditions, and again, maybe it's easy for me to talk coming from Estonia, but I work with journalists from like really difficult countries on a daily basis, but they just feel such motivation to keep on doing the work that they are doing. It's something in the mindset or in the worldview. And I think I have a very good example as well, that I said that I don't want to talk about Hungary, but like the press freedom, like press has been suppressed in Hungary for now, what, like 10 plus years. Where journalists are not allowed to, are not like, they can't ask Viktor Orban or his cronies any questions, they are ignored, and all of this is going on. Independent media has been bought up, so like we don't have major outlets and so on. But last week, on Thursday, our colleagues from Direct 36, non-profit investigative journalism media, they published a YouTube documentary, 50 minutes long, about the origin of wealth of Viktor Orban's family. 50 minutes long, and in one day it got 1 million views. By today I checked, it's 2.5 million views. It's Hungary's most popular, most viewed documentary ever. So even in these conditions, people want to receive such content, and independent journalism is able to actually provide it.
And I would say that even though Navalny was not a journalist, I mean, he was very close to journalists, and he did investigative journalism and had, you know, very important reporting on Putin and corruption. Same thing with Vladimir Karamurza, who won a Pulitzer Prize, who, by the way, will be our guest on March 24th, so that's an important plug. Recently released from prison in August. So I just want to go to ask you specifically
About that question, Hope?
about hope, because I would think that actually the role of journalists in the last several years, covering Maidan, covering all sorts of problems in Ukraine, corruption, but then, you know, the invasion of Donetsk, Luhansk, Crimea, now the full-scale invasion, has been so crucial in helping Ukrainians resist to very forceful, ongoing, relentless attacks.
I think a lot.
I'm
yeah,
giving you,
no, no,
I'm
no.
asking, you know, I'm reaching out like to really help you also think about how important the role is and hope.
I think Ukrainians and people in general are a lot more resilient than you might think you are, especially at the beginning. You know, Ukrainians are working, journalists are working and living under really harsh conditions. Like when I just turned on my phone, there's an air raid alert going on in Kyiv right now. It's constant. So, you know, people like you don't sleep at night because there's air raid alerts and things blowing up outside your window, or you have to go to the bomb shelter if you have kids. So just even if you're not at the front line, you're just constantly under pressure and stress. And yet people get up in the mornings, they take their kids to school, and they go to work. That's just what it is. It's like you have to adapt and stay hopeful and keep your resilience.
Very briefly,
Yeah.
because we have another question.
I have colleagues who are working in exile right now, and they're doing great investigative works. And I don't know where they are now currently, because it's too hard to Kyrgyzstan's citizen to go abroad and to get visa and to go somewhere and to get citizenship and so on. So they're working in different places, and they're doing very nice investigations. And I hope, my first hope is this, and another hope is our youth. Our younger generation, they are doing very creative things on TikTok, on Instagram, against regime, against oppressions.
So much for the wonderful discussion. Originally from Armenia, I definitely share the sentiments towards the bleak future of freedom of speech in Eurasia. Myself having friends who are in prison being persecuted currently from Azerbaijan, Georgia. So my question is to Holger. If you already mentioned a bit about the Russian community in exile, the journalists that are operating in Germany, Europe. So a lot of them came right after the invasion of Ukraine. They came to the Caucasus, Armenia, and Tbilisi. Georgia especially, but unfortunately they are leaving now because of, again, the bleak future in our countries as well. So I was wondering what the community, if there is at all, what are there any initiatives? Is there a community that is as organized as it is in Berlin or other capitals in Europe, in Estonia, but also the Baltics, if you know of any? Thank you.
I know that the Russian exile journalist community is pretty active. They are organizing their own conferences and awards. They have a conference, I think, every year in Berlin, actually. I know that there used to be some hotspots where they worked more in the Balkan countries, in the Baltic countries as well. They were in Latvia, but I think that in Latvia now the situation is a little bit more difficult because some of our more nationalistic governments don't want to have Russian media there as well. For example, TV Rain, one of the independent TV stations, was forced to basically leave Latvia as well. There are some Belarusian journalists are a lot in Vilnius, in Warsaw, but another issue is that it's increasingly more difficult to actually have Schengen visas. These people need to have visas, long-term residency permits. Actually, it's called short-term, but it's for 5 years. And European Union countries are not very open to providing it anymore. So I'm not so sure about the perspective here.
Nick?
Hi. This question probably is most pertinent to Central Asia, but I'm wondering if it has applicability to both Ukraine and Estonia. I'm wondering, what do you sense, especially in the Stans, Chinese influence, or which we know in geopolitically is aligned with Russia, certainly tacitly supporting Russia's war against Ukraine. But do you feel a visible presence in the space of them also spreading mis and disinformation, or are they sort of just leaving that up to Russia to do it for them? And I wonder if whether in Ukraine and Estonia you're feeling any or seeing any Chinese influence in the media space as well, or not?
Thank you for the question. Okay. It's a nice question. China fills this gap, which is promoted by, let's say, US. It's currently like, we have a gap of funding, and a lot of media organizations offered by Chinese, some state-controlled media, some funding currently right now. And I know some of the state-controlled our media channels, they are already receiving Chinese funding. But when it comes to dictate information and information flow, China is not going with the same way like Russia. They are not assaulting, they are not like directly saying or dictating us what to write and what not to write. They are so soft. Currently, they are so soft. But I don't know what will happen next. If US will pull off their funding totally, maybe China then can dictate something to our media. But within last 10 years, China is investing a lot to state-controlled media, and they are funding very well.
I haven't seen, or at least that I know of, Chinese influence in Ukrainian media landscape. But there were reports just yesterday, today, that Chinese, I don't know, private or state companies are getting contracts or being offered contracts to start operating in Ukrainian occupied territory. I think in terms of agriculture and things of that nature. And that would, for Russia, that would kind of be a way to solidify their control over these areas.
In Estonia, we can sometimes, the best experience is when the Chinese embassy sometimes sends a very disappointed press release, how journalists failed to promote Chinese national narrative about this or that. But the actual thing here is about TikTok. And then we can see the influence of TikTok in promoting disinformation narratives. One of our reporters did an experiment last summer, I think, that she bought a totally new phone, totally new SIM card, totally new TikTok user, and just started seeing that what are the videos, posts that TikTok gives you. And we saw that, like, I'm not good in numbers now, but in the first 100 videos, like a large portion of them actually led to pro-Russian disinformation and also about the war against Ukraine.
Time for one last question and brief responses. Thank you.
Well, may I echo again the thanks that have been said by other people for you being here today. We've learned in the last 24 hours that President Trump and President Putin have talked about a process to end the war and have even suggested Saudi Arabia as a potential mediator. My question to all three of you is, how well can you play a part in communicating the issues that come up in any peace talk and the compromises that might have to be accepted as a part of ending this war? And how do you feel that you can play a role in a lasting peace?
Joseph, we'll start with you.
I don't think that journalists, I think the only lasting peace that can come to Russia's war against Ukraine and the Russo-Ukrainian war is from Russia itself. Journalists aren't playing a role here at all in Russia's and Putin's mindset at all. they don't care what we say and what we do. So I don't think we necessarily have any role in that from Russia's perspective. What we can do is continue to work and inform the rest of the world. That may have an influence. But on Russia itself, no. And Russia is the key player here. They're the only ones that can really put an end to the war by just stop fighting it. That's it. And then the war's over, Ukraine isn't going to continue it.
I can only be agreeing with Joseph, and also I can continue my job, reporting about the impact of the war to Central Asian countries, to labor migrants in Russia. They were put into this war. They were sent to the Ukraine battlefield by Russian government. And every day, my colleagues in Kyrgyz RFE, in Azat, they're reporting how Kyrgyzstan is losing their citizen in Ukraine war, for example. And I can only do my reportings, and that's my influence. And I don't have also any power, and we don't have any power, rather than our pens and MacBooks.
Well, I totally agree with you, but the power that we have is to still report about the negotiations, and we can report how they are going. We can report about all the problems that there are. We can put that sort of pressure on there. And coming from Europe and trying to get our stories always published in as many languages as possible, including in English, I think that one of the tasks for us is to actually put pressure on European Union and then on European countries. I think that to secure a lasting peace, it's difficult to believe in this, or it's not up to us, but I totally believe that it is up to European countries to actually get their act together, to build their deterrence, to build their militaries, to actually stand firm against the Russian threat, and then to change the political discourse also among the electorate in European countries.
Thank you to the three of you and to Lynette for organizing this with the Weiser Center. And now to you, the last words.
So I just want to thank all of you for such a wonderful conversation. Genevieve, thank you for being such a good partner and really caring about this issue as it relates to, really, we're talking about one region, but as we know, it relates to the world right now. There was a question, I couldn't see who asked it, about democracy dies in darkness. Where did that question come from? So I just want to sort of give a little bit of a history lesson here on this term, because it was the Washington Post slogan, but to shout out Detroit, the phrase comes from federal judge Damon J. Keith, and who was appointed in 1967, which was the year I was born. And I looked it up because I wanted to make sure I fact-checked the origin. But after September 11th, after the attacks on September 11, 2001, the Justice Department began deporting Arab and Muslim immigrants in secret court proceedings, which the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit News, and the ACLU, and U.S. Congressman John Conyers challenged in federal court, arguing that it was a violation of the First Amendment to close immigration hearings to the public. And in his decision, Justice Keith wrote that Judge Keith wrote, "Democracy dies in the dark." Now the story is, and you can look this up, that Bob Woodward was the one who first mentioned this within the Washington Post. And if you read Marty Barron's book, the title of the book just went out of my Marty Barron's book. Marty Barron, the former editor of the Washington Post. Collision of Power, thank you. All of the Knight-Wallace Fellows in the room. Collision of Power, he talks about this and about Jeff Bezos thinking that this would be a great slogan. But I mention this because it's important that it was a federal judge who said democracy dies in the dark. that we need journalists, and we need our judiciary to be independent, and we need our Congress to act, and we need the executive branch. And all of these things, there's a reason that journalism is called the fourth estate. And we need it all to work together to protect it. So I'm so, again, pleased to see so many people in the room, because it means that you know this is important. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Charles, for giving us Wallace House. It's an honor to convene this conversation every year in your honor. And please, we invite you all to stay for the reception, talk to our panelists, talk to one another, and figure out how we can protect the values that we hold dear. Thank you.